Today on the LA Food Podcast, I'm your host Lucas Servodio, slightly sunburned from waiting in line for more than an hour at the brand new Something About Her sandwich shop in West Hollywood. Were the sandwiches worth the hype? Keep listening to find out, dear listener. We're joined today by someone who's been much discussed on this podcast in recent weeks. Eddie Navarrette is the executive director of the Independent Hospitality Coalition, in addition to being one of LA's foremost consultants in helping restaurants navigate our city's infamous red tape. He's been at the center of advocating for LA and California restaurants for several years now, helping shape much-needed policies for boosting businesses during these unprecedented, difficult times. Yes, we walk through his somewhat circuitous career journey, which includes playing in punk rock bands and joining the circus, but we also dive deep into the many issues plaguing restaurants today and what IHC is looking to do about them. Personally, dear listener, this was a fascinating conversation as someone who has a lot of questions, but not a whole lot of answers about why running an LA restaurant in 2024 is so difficult. More importantly, Eddie is an absolute delight of a human being, and this conversation left me super inspired and optimistic about the future of restaurants, especially knowing there are people like him behind the scenes making real change happen. But first, a couple of super quick things that caught my eye, including my epic quest to try one of those damn Something About Her sandwiches. That's all coming up next, so without further ado, let's chow down. The LA Food Podcast is brought to you by House of Macadamias. Dear listener, do you have a favorite nut? Here's why I've happily given that title over to the macadamia. First, it's chock full of nutritional benefits, including one of the best omega 6-3 ratios in the nut game. 8 times better than pistachios and 20 times better than cashews. Cashew? More like cash-ew. Second, it's super versatile. You can have them as a snack. You can find tons of applications to include them in your cooking. You can even use the oil for cooking, in addition to using it for skin and health purposes. If you want to get in on the macadamia game, head to the LA Food Pod page on houseofmacadamias.com to access my curated list of macadamia products. We've got extra virgin cold-pressed macadamia oil, savory macadamia snack packs, and salted or unsalted macadamia nut butter. All great for snacking, all great for cooking. The best part is, when you buy an LA Food Pod bundle on houseofmacadamias.com, you'll instantly get a free multi-pack of macadamia snack bars featuring flavors like chocolate, white chocolate, and coconut white chocolate. And if you subscribe to our bundle, you get a 15% discount on all of it. And don't worry, you can pause, cancel, or adjust the subscription at any time. So what are you waiting for? Head to www.houseofmacadamias.com/pages/LA-foods and go nuts. Dear listener, I will not be spending too much time on newsy bits today, not just because, honestly, there wasn't that much that caught my eye, so to speak, but also because I'm just so excited about today's guest that I really just can't wait for you to listen to our conversation. That said, my name wouldn't be Luca and I wouldn't be the host of the LA Food Podcast if I didn't have at least a couple things I wanted to talk to you about, right? So, first things first, you may have heard of a new sandwich shop that opened over in West Hollywood. It's called Something About Her, and if you've been on social media, you've probably seen people posting about it. You've probably seen journalists also writing stories about it, and you may be wondering why. Well, Something About Her is associated with two characters, Ariana Madix and Katie Maloney, of a popular Bravo reality TV show called Vanderpump Rules. Now, Vanderpump Rules, for about 10 years, was just a regular reality show, but last year, it really blew up when a scandal emerged. It turns out that one of the cast members had been cheating on their longtime partner of 10 years with the partner's best friend. Now, the person that was getting cheated on happens to be Ariana Madix, one of the people behind Something About Her sandwiches. Honestly, ever since the whole scandal happened, which has been dubbed Scandival after the person, the cheater, if you will, Tom Sandoval, Ariana's life has just blown up. She's been getting all these like brand deals. She played Roxy Hart in Chicago on Broadway. Like people have really rallied to her defense, not just fans, but also like companies wanting to work with her. For a while now, Ariana and Katie had been planning to open a sandwich shop, and this project kept getting delayed. It was supposed to open last May. However, one thing was certain, thanks to like Ariana's star rising, whenever this sandwich shop would open, it was sure to be a huge hit. That's why anybody who's been following this has been so excited, especially if they live in LA, to go check out Something About Her sandwiches when and if it opened. Something About Her sandwiches did open on Wednesday, May 22nd, and me being, a diligent pseudo-journalist, I thought, you know what I'm going to do for my loyal listeners? I am going to go brave the lines at Something About Her, and I'm going to see what all the fuss is about. Now, I thought I was being smart. I thought as long as I didn't get there early, when all the real super Vanderpump heads would be there, then maybe I would miss the sort of like onslaught, right? I showed up at around 1 p.m. after already having had a bowl of bún bò Huế, the Vietnamese noodle dish. And first things first, the signs were pretty good. Like, that is a difficult part of town to find a parking spot in. It's located right at the corner of Melrose and Robertson. So peak Melrose Place, extremely difficult place to find a parking lot. I've spent many fractions of an hour looking for parking there, and I found parking immediately. So I'm thinking, sweet as a nut, this is going to be amazing, super easy. I'm going to get there, in, out, sandwich, boom. I walk over to Something About Her, and it's a tiny space on Robertson, right up the street from Sir, which is actually another one of the main locations on Vanderpump Rules, owned by Lisa Vanderpump. And the line doesn't look that bad. It looks like a regular Bub and Grandma's line, if you've ever been to Bub and Grandma's in Glassell Park. Like, honestly, I've seen longer lines outside Diddy Reese's in Westwood. I'm thinking 45 minutes, an hour max, and I'm going to be in there. I can make good use of this time. I'm going to edit and publish a video to my LA Countdown account while I'm in line. It's going to be the best day ever, right? So I wait in line, and I've published the video. I've edited it. I've published it. And about an hour has passed. I realized that I'm approaching halfway through the line, and I notice that something I had not seen was that there is an alleyway right in the middle of the line. When I got to the alleyway, I saw a line that snaked all the way down the alleyway and back. So at first I was like, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe the alleyway isn't quite as lengthy as it looks. But as I started talking to people in the alleyway who had been there longer than I, some told me that they had been waiting only in the alleyway for 2 hours. I looked at my watch. I realized I had already been waiting an hour and a half. So the time was now 2:30 p.m. and the shop closed at 4 p.m. I was like, there's no way I'm getting in another hour and a half. So I cut my losses and I got out of line. After waiting for 90 minutes, I didn't even get a sandwich. I didn't even get close to having a sandwich. So I apologize, dear listener. I feel like I failed you on my quest to tell you whether Something About Her sandwiches is actually worth it. That said, there were plenty of journalists, real journalists, who actually did their job and got there early enough to try sandwiches and reported on it. Rebecca Rowland of Eater has a piece out on it, and also friend of the pod, Karen Palmer, has a very, very funny piece on it in SF Gate. And by all accounts, the sandwiches are not bad. They're not going to blow your mind, but apparently, they're of good enough quality and at similar or even lower prices when compared with some of the sandwiches in sort of like the neighboring neighborhoods. So is the sandwich worth waiting 4 hours for? I can pretty confidently say no. However, that being said, from what I hear, it's not a half bad sandwich. I'll definitely try to go back someday, I promise. Another thing that caught my eye this week is that the world's 50 best dropped their list of the best restaurants, number 51 through 100. So it's sort of like the little brother list, the real list, the world's 1 through 50 best restaurants. That comes out June 6th in Las Vegas. They always drop this list first, almost as like a teaser. I was feeling a little optimistic about Los Angeles' chances, especially after Cato was named one of their restaurants to watch just a few weeks ago. However, Los Angeles' streak of not making it on these lists continued. There was not a single Los Angeles restaurant that even got a sniff. I did, however, want to give props to 2 restaurants. Actually, number 100 is a restaurant in Valle de Guadalupe called Fauna. And while I haven't been, it's a restaurant I've been following really closely. It's one that Bill Esparza has been banging the drum about for a long time. And I'm really glad to see them getting some shine. Valle de Guadalupe on the up. I can't wait to visit. I am planning my visit as we speak. Number 99 on the list was Cosme, which is Enrique Olvera's New York restaurant. Now, Enrique Olvera is not from Los Angeles, but he has two restaurants in Los Angeles. He has Damian and Atla on Abbot Kinney. And as far as I'm concerned, if you've opened two restaurants in Los Angeles, you might as well be an honorary Angelino, okay? So I'm not claiming this is a Los Angeles win, but, maybe it's Los Angeles just dipping a toe in the world's 50 best conversation, okay? Finally, the final thing I wanted to touch on before we get to our conversation with Eddie is the LA Times continued their excellent coverage of what will save restaurants. Cindy Carcamo, Danielle Dorsey, Sarah Mosqueda, and Betty Halleck spoke with several restaurateurs who have closed restaurants over the past few years, basically to find out what their life has been like since they shuttered their businesses. It's a pretty interesting piece. Some of them are like, yo, I'm never doing this again. Some of them are like, hey, I'm kind of getting the itch to maybe try this one more time. But all of them tell very sort of heartfelt, personal, and I think also interesting stories that speak to the challenges that restaurants are facing. I'm not going to get into any of them too deep. We've talked about this series a lot. It's an excellent series. And of course, I will be linking the story in the show notes. That'll probably do for today, dear listener. So without further ado, we'll be right back after the break with Eddie Navarrette. Dear listener, my wife recently decided to start eating meat after more than 15 years of being a vegetarian, and being the conscientious consumer that I am, I've been looking for ways to make our household's meat consumption as high quality and sustainable as possible. That's why I'm absolutely thrilled to have found First Light Farms, a small collective of passionate family farmers in New Zealand who are quietly changing the world. Not only are they producing the most tender, rich, and succulent Wagyu beef money can buy, but you can rest assured that First Light's cattle were raised as nature intended, living it up on lush pasture, eating a 100% grass diet with absolutely no grains, no animal byproducts, and no feedlots. The result is the best tasting meat in the game, full of natural marbling and packed with omega-3 fats. If you've ever enjoyed a meal at Ma2 in Beverly Hills, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Ma2 famously sources all of its meat directly from First Light, and the good news is that you too can have First Light Farms meats delivered straight to your door. All you have to do is visit www.firstlight.farm, where you can buy their meats and also sign up for their members-only steak club. Members of the steak club enjoy tons of benefits, including monthly shipments of steaks, access to the highest marble score meats, and, this is my favorite part, access to First Light's full library of proprietary recipes and techniques. Also, you can cook the perfect steak within the comfort of your own home. Buying good steak isn't easy, and it isn't cheap. First Light delivers the highest quality at an incredible deal, and now that I've seen the light, I'm never going back. Visit www.firstlight.farm to learn more and use the code LAFood10 for a 10% discount on your first order. Dear listener, I am stoked because today, joining us on the LA Food Podcast, someone whose name and work has been much discussed on this platform. He's the co-founder and executive director of the Independent Hospitality Coalition, as well as the chief consultant of FE Design and Consulting. It's Eddie Navarrette. Eddie, how you doing today?
Fantastic. Thank you for asking, Luca.
Good. Glad to hear. Where are you calling us from?
My upstairs office in Little Tokyo, just over the Japanese Village Plaza.
Oh my God. So those are your regular stomping grounds, Little Tokyo?
This is my home. A lot of history here. I appreciate this place. It's sacred to me. The community is wonderful. It's where I walk to every day. I see the TOT ladies setting out the dining tables every day. I see the sushi chefs bringing in all their fish every day. It's really, I couldn't ask for any more. I'm close to the officials, so if I need to find an official for some sort of item that I need, I can find him at the local sandwich shop at Mike's Deli. I'm right in the heart of everything. I can have a good walk up to Grand if I need to. It's a good place to live and be and work.
That's actually a great question. If you need to stalk a public official in Los Angeles for lunch, what are your best bets?
Ooh, so I usually just hide in the bushes or by the restroom. Usually when a plan checker doesn't get back to me, I will hide out in the hallway where I know they have to use the restroom at some point, and then I know I'll find them there. If it's a city council member, I know that they also have to use the restroom, and so I will hang out by the exit to the chambers, and usually they'll come out, and then I'll be waiting for them.
Yeah, some more than others, you might say. Now, Eddie, where did you grow up? Are you from LA?
Born and raised in Los Angeles, yes. And that's always a really hard question to answer because I just grew up so fast. I mean, that's the name, Fast Eddie. Yeah,
Hmm.
no, I mean, I was 16. I was living in Highland Park, and then we moved to Fairfax and Melrose area. I used to work at Centerfold Newsstand, and then I worked at Wasteland, and then we moved to the Arts District. I lived with my bandmates. It's just a whole other story in chapter two, if we want to ever get there. But I grew up in music and played with a lot of rock and roll bands. And so living with my bandmates, we moved around. I lived in closets. I lived in apartments and wherever else that they'll take me. But after the Arts District, which I have a strong connection to, and that's how I first got associated with Little Tokyo, is we moved to K-Town, where I lived at the Gaylord
Hmm.
Hotel. I'm not sure if you know that space off the Mid-Wilshire area.
HMS Bounty is only one of my favorite restaurants ever.
So much history. That's where I really learned how to drink and order a scotch.
Me too. We have so much in common.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And then after that, I moved to Long Beach. I was living in Long Beach for a little bit, and I got a job with the circus, and then that's a whole nother story.
Okay, so you mentioned it, but your nickname is Fast Eddie, okay? How does one acquire the nickname Fast Eddie?
Luca, there are many who want to claim the rights to that story, but truly the one real story here today, which I'm happy to give you, was on the stage at Raji's Hollywood, probably like
Hmm.
early 1993. I was playing with my band, Charles Brown Superstar. I was too young to get in because it was a bar, so I was outside waiting in the alley. All my bandmates were much older than me, and so they were all in there having a good time, drinking and partying. And I was this new guy in this band, which of older people. I was used to just playing in a lot of backyard parties or all ages clubs, and so here I am at this bar venue. I'm totally stressed and filled with adrenaline. I mean, when you're 16 years old, you have a lot in you already, a lot of that adrenaline, and I needed to put it somewhere. And as I got on that stage, I played our set that was supposed to be for 30 minutes and about 20. And as soon as we were done, singer turned back at me like, "Oh my God, Fast Eddie." That was Bennett Rogers. So she really has the claim to that name. And ever since then, it's been something that everyone has called me.
And what instrument did you play?
Drums initially.
Well, it's funny, yeah.
Mhm.
Fast Luca is also what my college girlfriend used to call me, but that was for a completely different reason. Now, at what point did you start working in hospitality?
Oh, so I started first working at Michelli's in Hollywood. There was a job
Mm.
opening for singing waiters,
Hmm.
and I was really excited about the position. I'm not sure if you know much about the history of Michelli's, but they had two locations, one in Universal City, it was just still there, and then they have one off of Las Palmas, I think it is, in that area off of Hollywood. And I'll never forget the interview. It was raining, and I knew that this was the thing about singing waiters, and so I practiced inside my car. I know we had cassettes back then, and so I put in my cassette, and I was, practicing all these old Italian songs because I'm a musician and I knew how to sing, and so I was practicing, getting ready for it. Bobby Darin, Frank Sinatra, all of those guys. And so I went in, and then they walked me downstairs into the basement. It was like a scene out of Goodfellas.
Hmm.
And you had all these guys with suits on, it was like very, like way too cliche of an environment to be in. And I was ready for it. And, when you're on stage all the time, you have to be brave. And that's what I was. And they just said, um, "So what can you do? What experience you have?" I said, "None." They said, "Okay, we can start you as a delivery man." And I said, "Okay." And I was hired, no singing, but hey, I learned some songs. And so now at karaoke, I am your guy when it comes to old Italian songs.
Good to know. I mean, singing delivery guy, there's a market for that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. There's always a market for something.
So how did your career in hospitality progress? Because I understand you had quite a few gigs.
Yeah. So after Michelli's, I ended up going to Long Beach, and I was in Long Beach for some time. And I got a job, as I was saying, with the circus. As I'm sure you were wondering, what the hell, the circus? We're not even ready for that yet. Yeah, I was working at Cirque du Soleil, and I was helping with just doing production work, and they were a traveling circus. And, as a musician, we We don't have a lot of skills other than being able to work at, just something that's part-time or a restaurant or what have you. Our main thing is playing music. That's like usually, that's what I spent most of my time in. And so these kind of odd jobs were things that I was looking to do. And so there I was at Cirque du Soleil, and I did the concessions. I learned about food there. And then from there, I got the job as a kitchen designer in the Valley. But at that time, it really wasn't like a sustainable practice for me. It wasn't something that I really wanted to do.
Hmm.
And so I ended up getting a job now being 21 at Three of Clubs over in Santa Monica and Vine. And so as I was working there, that's really where the transformation of, who I am today kind of happened, because I met a lot of bar designers. I met a lot of people like Said Moses and a gentleman named Ricky Klein, who was the main designer who drank there all the time. And I was telling him about what I did. And people just, at a bar, you talk a lot. I'm a name like Fast Eddie, you get around, and I was always a hustler. So I talked about how I can help them with their bar designs. I could tell them how I knew about the health department.
Hmm.
I told them about things that I knew how to do, which I absolutely had no business telling people I knew what to do, because I had no idea how to do them. Like fire department consulting when places would get shut down. But I knew it was the direction that I wanted to go into. And so I would always solicit my services. And so that's how I went further down the path of being Fast Eddie. But really, it was the bartending that kind of got me in there with the family of what, restaurants do and the community that they build.
So let's back up a little. You mentioned the kitchen designer job. How did you finagle that one? It doesn't seem like the kind of thing you just fall into.
No, you don't. I actually declined the job, request from a friend. I was trying to get into production because in LA, that's what everybody does, right? You want to get into production, especially if you don't have any skills. Hey, get into production. And so I tried doing that, a lot of fails. And I called this one guy that I knew who used to work with the Power Rangers at the time.
Mm.
And I was like, oh yeah, hell yeah, I want to be part of that. He said, I got injured, but I have a job as a kitchen designer. If you want to work with me, we just get high all day and we draw with rulers. And I'm like, oh, yeah, hell yeah, I can do that. And so I interviewed with this guy in the Valley, and talk about cliche. He was there. My interview was his shirt being off. He was probably around 300 and some pounds, 6'7". He was sitting there with no shirt on, rolling joints, and asked me to sit down and get high with him, which of course I said yes. And he asked me if I wanted the job, and I was hired. And so I started working with this guy, and he would get so high. He would get in his Suburban and he would drive to different job sites all day and talk to people about, what they wanted for their kitchen designs. And I was like, this is kind of cool. I could actually keep this job. I'm sure I can do. And then we would go back to his office in the Valley, and then we would just get high, and then I would draw kitchens. And I was like, I love doing this. This is so much fun. I didn't know that I actually knew how to draw at all. I could just use these rulers because we drew by hand back then. And so that's how ancient I am. And, it was something that I thought was just artistic and, creative. And I contributed to mostly mom and pops that were, building their kitchens, or whether it was a gas station or a convenience market or a coffee shop, or if it was Barney's Beanery was one of our customers, bigger places. And it was just so fun to be a part of that experience. And as I started meeting people like the folks at Hugo's Tacos or Hugo's before that,
No way.
these people really took me in, and they would feed me, and they knew I was a struggling musician. It was just a community that I knew was going to be something that I wanted to be more a part of and want to help more. And I had no idea at that moment that it would take me to who I am today. But, there's all the crossroads that get you to those places. But it was those first introductions that I had of just meeting the people who I was doing the service for that really made me want to keep doing this work.
So at what point in this whole kitchen design experience, and then at the Three of Clubs, did you start sort of noticing all of the red tape that surrounds and hampers restaurants and hospitality establishments?
Okay, so that's probably chapter 2. We have to go back to my time playing in music. And in music, I had the opportunity of being a part of an institution music venue called Jabberjaw. It was right on Crenshaw and Pico, right off of there by Gus's Chicken. And so this was back in the early 90s. And this was a place for, artists, musicians, degenerates, people that just didn't really have like a place to go. People that didn't belong on Ventura Boulevard, didn't belong on malls, didn't belong on Crenshaw Boulevard. But there was like this very like small space where you'd be able to play shows and we'd play movies, and it was just like a kind of like a club. It was an all ages club. And in order for us to have performances there, we had to be a cafe.
Hmm.
And so the owners had to get it permitted as a cafe. And as we would have, our now music license, we would oftentimes, because we were all very young back then, we would get cited by the fire department for being overcrowded.
Mm.
And so some of our venues for touring musicians would end up getting shut down. And that was very traumatic to me, I feel like. And I had no idea, of course, that I would be here today talking to you about how I got started in doing this work now. But it really started there. It really started with being traumatized and seeing that people that could have a place to call home and have a community, for that to be taken away from them. Someone had to be there for them. Someone had to stand up and have the answers. And it was just something that once I got this job as a kitchen designer, it all just connected.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to do this for these people.
Yeah.
I want to do this for the Smell. I'm not sure if you know the Smell over on Main. They're
Mm.
also like an indie music venue, kind of a DIY space. They got cited by code enforcement. They asked me if I can help them, and I was like, absolutely, I will help you. And I got them their permits, and knowing that I had this kind of power to like help the artist community, I think that's really what kind of set the course even further and put the wind at the sails that I need to be able to cut red tape for people. Further, even back when I was like kind of a broke kitchen designer, but at this time I actually got carpal tunnel and I wasn't able to play music anymore. I wasn't able to bartend anymore, so I had to just do kitchen design work, which is kind of
Mm.
more chapter 4 story. But all that, when that was happening, it just kind of like I had to do whatever job I could find. So I started doing like canopies, or I did order to comply for people that were living inside of garages, right? So we call them ADUs now. But these are people that were living in these spaces for 30 or 40 years.
Mm.
And somehow people knew that I existed with the name like Fast Eddie, right? And they're like, can you help me with my home? Because I have to leave based on what this document says. And I was like, sure, because I was broke, and this is what you do when you're broke. You offer your services for anything. And I was able to save people from not getting kicked out of their homes.
Wow.
And that feeling, I think, just really overcame me. And I can't say this is the most like profitable sector of my career choice, but it's definitely the most fulfilling values wise. And so when I wake up every day, I know that I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. So how did word start to get out about your services? And how did you sort of like realize, oh, wow, this isn't just a favor I'm doing for people. This is actually like something that really needs to be done by someone, and I'm the dude to do it.
Like I mentioned, crossroads, right? You have all the crossroads, and there's always these projects. There's always these moments
Mm-hmm.
in your life where you're like, okay, do I go down further? Do I keep going? Do I build a business around this?
Mm-hmm.
And during the timing of all of my development, I went through the recession of 2007. Things got really, really hard, especially for a young person with his starting his business who had no idea what he was doing. It was a part of being an employer that was very fulfilling to me, giving people jobs and being able to keep them.
Mm.
It was being able to be, at this time I was in Chinatown, and I was able to help the local bar there called Grand Star. And they needed help with their permits, and they were my landlord, and I was able to help them, and I was able to pay my rent through the recession because of that work. It was like, okay, this makes sense that I keep on going down this path.
Mm.
But I'll never forget, there was this one Ethiopian couple who said that they knew somebody at the city, and a contractor had hooked me up with them because they needed some plans. And they're like, don't worry, it's all going to be easy. It's going to be so easy. We know somebody. It's classic. And for me, people always say they know somebody, and then until they don't.
Mm.
And I'm meeting with these people, and we're talking about their floor plan. I'm doing their kitchen design work, which is so much fun. And we go to the city, and we meet the person that they say that they know, and we find out that the place is not a restaurant. We find out that the permits did not accurately display what the place had been used for the last 30, 40, 50 years, something like this. And so the person that they knew comes back to us after we have our first plan check meeting, and they basically said, you can't have a restaurant here. I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all both Ethiopian. And so they were, getting the news, and this lady just starts, crying. And it was hard for me to let that lady leave knowing that she wouldn't get her restaurant open and that she had already leased this space, which is common, by the way. People lease spaces that are not accurately permitted. And being told that they weren't able to be at this restaurant because they didn't have the parking. There was no way for us to do the use change, right? The change of use.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to get this lady's restaurant open. I'm going to figure out a way. And so that determination, that persistence, and that hiding around the corner and tracking down plan checkers, I eventually wore them down. And we got that lady's restaurant open. And it's moments like that you're like, oh man, I'm totally going to keep doing this. It's the moments of helping people like Nikki Nakayama, who you have no idea who she is. She comes knocking on your door and she says, hi, and, she's scruffy hair, small, lady. And she's like, can you help me with my restaurant? I'm like, sure. Yeah. Okay. And I go in and pick up a check over at her. At the time, she was working out of a deli, and she had, white tablecloths that she would put on the tables to convert it into like a Michelin star tasting menu, restaurant venue. And back then, I was, I'm still very much kind of an artist, kind of scrappy dude. And I just ate Carl's Jr. I was like a Carl's Jr., fast food, just like survival mode type of eater.
Crazy.
And I went to Nikki's place to pick up a check, and she's like, please stay for dinner. And there I was sitting there, and she had me try her food. And I was so blown away. I had never tasted food like that before. And I was, from being a young artist, struggling artist, and tasting something like that, your mind just gets blown.
Yeah.
And it opened my eyes to how much these folks are actually artists themselves, and how much creativeness that they carry, and how there needs to be someone to support that creativity, to help them along their journeys. So not only am I helping the ethnic portion, the small business, the mom and pop, but I'm also paying it forward to the artist community. And now it was the other crossroad. Now it was really opening this up to something that I really knew was for me.
It's a little reminiscent of what you felt back when you were when you experienced the traumatizing experience at the Smell, where these artists were being hampered from doing what they loved and what they were good at. You kind of saw the same thing happening with food when you were able to recognize it as art, especially.
Exactly.
Now, want to zoom out for a moment, because a lot of our listeners, well, many of our listeners are in the industry and will know exactly about the headaches that you're talking about. Some of them aren't, though. So could you give us a walkthrough of the types of permits that you're talking about and all of the sort of like various steps and rings of fire that folks have to jump through in order to even be able to open a restaurant?
When you open a restaurant, there's no training for permits. There's no training in culinary school for what permits you're going to need. It really depends on the municipality that you're in. So I do a lot of teaching at LA Trade Tech and sometimes at Institute of Culinary Education on those areas, because somebody needs to give people that guidance. Unfortunately, in most cases, it's given to you from the health department, who are not really the best communicators. I mean, I love a lot of those people, and I consider a lot of them my dear friends and even family. But they're overworked, and they're dealing with a lot of mental health issues over there. The leadership is not the greatest. And so, they're under pressure to provide a service. They are the front lines, actually, of where you get your information on how you get your health permit, because that's where it all starts. You need to have your health permit, and I tell people you got to work backwards from there, right? So if you want a health permit, you have to have a business license, you have to have a seller's permit, right? So those are like the trifecta bases that you need to have. Now you also have to have, your ServSafe certification. You need to have possibly a police permit for your alarm system. You need to have a fire permit if you're over 50 occupants. You need to have an industrial wastewater permit if you have grease, which is mainly almost any restaurant there is. It really kind of depends on your operation. And so I want to make sure that people have all that documentation, even starting out with the use of the building that you're in, which we call a certificate of occupancy. That's something that runs with the property. And the only way that you would know that exists is if you actually knew where to find that information at the Department of Building and Safety. right? So those are fundamental things that people need to know that they have to have. But things like the alcohol license or your sidewalk seating permit,
Mm.
or, if you have a parklet, or, there are just kind of many different permit nuances that I feel like people have to be educated on. But if you're a music venue, it's like it's so much worse. There's like something like 12 or 15 other permits that you need to have, and so I created a business on it.
It's confusing. Yeah, it sounds like a labyrinthian process that needs guidance. Now, over the years, what have you identified as some of the most sort of like common pitfalls people experience when it comes to like, the headaches you've seen people get?
Right. It's always the same thing when people lease a space without doing their due diligence.
Hmm.
And people having false expectations about how much things are going to cost and how long they're going to take.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Those are the two fundamental questions that I answer: is how long and how much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it really depends on the space itself, on what was it permitted as. And so I have to start there. I have to know. I mentioned those words, certificate of occupancy. That is what the building is legally described as, what it can be used for, the type of occupancy. So, people will lease a space being charmed by their broker, who is, leasing the space and saying, hey, it's restaurant ready, but not really being informed on what that means, right? Oftentimes they'll confuse the language of what a conditional use permit is, which is another permit if you serve alcohol that you need to have in the city of Los Angeles and some other municipalities as well. And they'll confuse that language. And a lot of that just comes from kind of just ignorance from that industry as a whole. So I actually went to the source, and so I went to try to get my sales license, my brokers for real estate.
Hmm.
In that process, I was able to find out, like from the source, how they learn to become real estate people. I heard my professor confusing conditional use permit with certificate of occupancy. In fact, certificate of occupancy wasn't mentioned at all
Hmm.
in the entire discussion. We talked about residential uses, but we did not talk about like the commercial aspects and the nuances of entitlements there. And so I was shocked to see that they don't even get the education they need to really represent these properties the way that they should be representing them.
Did you at that point stand up and be like, I got this, prof, I'm going to teach a class?
Well, before the pandemic, we used to do classes. We would do them at music venues because I have that synergy with, at the Regent, or we had them at the Echo.
Hmm.
I had them over in Chinatown, one of the nightclubs out there. But really wanted to, provide that kind of dynamic of, venues and restaurant people and
Mm-hmm.
education.
Mm-hmm.
But then once the pandemic hit, it really just all that kind of went down, and then I took a different role on.
So how expensive is this whole process for a restaurant? Because we've talked about how expensive it is to just operate a restaurant in general and the tough margins and whatnot, but we haven't spent too much time talking about the upfront costs when it comes just to permitting. I'm sure the costs vary widely depending on what the type of business it is, but in general, what can folks expect to have to shell out?
It depends on the space that they're leasing, right? If it's a space that already has a kitchen, which I highly recommend, or a space that they're going to be remodeling, then you start going into a series of permits, which can be really difficult to navigate through. Which can put you into a 6-month process, sometimes 9 months, even if it's an existing restaurant. Once you start remodeling and pulling a building permit, then you're talking about rewiring and energy conservation and ADA upgrades, handicap upgrades, that sort of thing. And so it could get really intense when it comes to the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what money is. Time is money. So it really comes out to, how much free rent did you have going into it? How much is the construction going to cost that you want to do? And again, that's just remodeling an existing restaurant. If you're doing a brand new, conversion, change of use from something that did not have a restaurant or a kitchen there before, and now you're building a kitchen there. And I'm not talking about the use. I'm talking about if nothing was there before, like there was no plumbing,
Yeah.
and there is no hood, and there is no electrical panel, and you are putting all that in, all of the infrastructure to go into a restaurant is what's really expensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To have to build in the new sewer line, to have to build in the new electrical panel. And for a lot of older buildings, we are undersized when it comes to electrical capacity, which is very worrisome as we're going in the direction of everything going to electrical when our older building stock does not have that capability.
Hmm.
We can't do a lot of electrical, which is why we have to survive on gas more. It's not only less expensive, but it's also just more affordable
Yeah.
for us to go with gas, unfortunately. So until we change that model, that's going to be a problem. But again, going back to just all the things that a restaurant has, the hood system, everything that goes on the roof, the air conditioning, how that air conditioning gets ran, that's all really expensive stuff because it's construction materials, and construction materials have gone up at least by double
Yeah.
since pre-pandemic. And so, I may have told somebody that it's going to cost you at least 500,000 to do a construction of a build out for maybe a 1,000 square foot restaurant, whereas now it's probably $1 million, right? Like it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
and again, depending on how long that process is going to take you, it may cost you even more with the rent and how much that's costing now.
No, that's wild. I was actually just reading a piece in the LA Times by Stephanie Brajo that about the tough times that restaurants are having, and we've talked a lot about the costs of rising, but we've always thought about that in terms of like, of course, the costs of their products and of their labor, but all of these costs of construction materials too, and all of the things that go into repairs and whatnot, those are all going up too. And, I mean, that's well covered in the piece as well. And we're going to get a little bit into what more can be done for restaurants moving forward in just a little bit here. But before we do that, I wanted to quickly hear from you about a couple of case studies about how you've helped restaurants. I read some interesting ones on your website, but one that stood out to me was Musso and Frank, just because it's such a historic spot. Seems like you did some pretty cool work there.
I'll be honest, it was not that cool actually, but what was cool was actually just working for Musso and Frank. It's a spot that I go to regularly. I mean, Mark Extravera is someone that I admire in the industry. He was great to work with. And so, being able to work for people that you actually respect so much and that you dine at the restaurants and have been since you were little was something really meaningful to me. But we did help them with the expansion of their private dining area. But Musso and Frank's is already cool, so unfortunately, I didn't have anything to do with that. But
What is a cool one then?
yeah, well, I'll tell you an award-winning, now I think world award-winning barista coffee, culinary coffee. I want to be sure I'm being correct with my terminology here, but he owns a coffee shop and he's getting awards for what he does. Anyhow. I'm not going to mention the name unless that's okay. I'm not sure if that's a thing that we do here.
We can mention names, whatever you want.
All right. So it was Be Bright Coffee. Yeah, Be Bright Coffee. This guy is such a leader in his industry. I have a lot of respect for him, not to mention just tasting his coffee was just so exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
But he had been running his establishment for maybe about a year and a half and opened it during the pandemic. And back then, I'm not sure if you saw the article about, the unfortunate event with the health department and one of the workers taking her own life.
Yeah.
But, it unveiled a lot of the issues that the health department's dealing with being understaffed and overworked. And in that, we were able to, unfortunately, rather, the businesses had not been getting their inspections.
Mm.
And because they weren't getting their inspections, there was a lapse on some of the permitting.
Mm-hmm.
And so people that thought that they had their health permits ended up not being compliant. And so unfortunately, the gentleman at Be Bright Coffee was one of those businesses. And so they were such a great, like local business, and all the restaurants went there. And, just a mom and pop shop, worked there with his wife. They were adorable, and they got shut down by the health department because there was a lapse on the health permit. And there was nothing wrong with the establishment and the way that it was. It was built as a cafe before.
Mm-hmm.
It had been there. There were no issues. People didn't get poisoned from, drinking coffee that had a foodborne illness in it, right? That's not something that generally happens.
Yeah.
But it was because of the process. And so they were told that they had to go to plan check and they had to submit plans because that's what the health department generally will tell you. But when they hired me, I said, no, you're not going to do that. Let's go to the health department and talk to them and see if we can work out another process, which we sometimes call the site evaluation, which is where I can advise a restaurant or a cafe on what the requirements are that the health department would ask you to do as far as finishes and hot water and that sort of thing, cleanliness and protection, like the sneeze guard. I put those things in there and was able to get them open within the next couple of weeks. So it was, for me, a success story is just getting them back open as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Nothing hurts me more than hearing of a business who's been serving a community get shut down and now needing help and being in that place and being forced to be in that place. I think that's what's the most meaningful for me. Those are some of the more successful stories. I'm working with this one restaurant right now, which is this place in Beverly Hills, and they're owned by some Russian folks,
Hmm.
and the design team is from England, and the chef is from Italy.
Hmm.
And we have to get on these calls and we have to figure out how we're going to build this restaurant. And it is the most unpractical, like mess of a conversation that happens in this process. And it's just the communication is obscene. Not to mention, we have to do these calls, in the morning, early morning, or late at night. And so that's not helpful either, but that's a huge challenge. But, once this finishes, it's going to be at the top of the list for the success story.
Wow. Well, that sounds like the United Nations of restaurant permitting. Actually, I wanted to double click on a little bit of the health department situation because we've talked about it on the podcast before. It's that story that came out about the health department and its challenges and being understaffed and what that has meant to restaurants. When I'm out with my wife, especially, and we're going to a restaurant and we see a B grade or a C grade or something like that, there's immediately a reflex, shall I say, on her part of, yo, we shouldn't eat here, right? Like we're going to get sick. Can you talk a little bit about how realistic that is, especially in this sort of day and age when we know that the health department is a little behind schedule? How founded is the fear of I'm going to get sick if I eat here?
I think there's a lot of A grades that exist. There's a lot of clean places that exist where people get sick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it really has too much of a difference. I think it has to do more with kind of like sometimes the food as it comes in, it already has those contaminants in it,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to get sick.
Yeah.
For me, like I look at things like what does actually contribute to foodborne illnesses, and I think it comes down to people washing their hands,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is one great thing that we came out of COVID is that people actually wash their hands now, and that it's where they're getting their products from, right? And that's the good thing about small businesses that they source locally. They're not looking at they're not Buffalo Wild
Mm-hmm.
Wings, right? They're not getting it from chicken from an unsustainable source where you could be getting those contaminants where you could have that type of sickness that would evolve from there. I know we had an oyster scare a little while
Mm-hmm.
ago, but the oysters came from a particular area. They came from Mexico. They didn't come from the West Coast or from British Columbia or East Coast, right? They came from Mexico, and so there's a containment of where that came from. But I think really, I hear of a lot of people getting sick more from the bigger chains than I do the smaller mom and
Yeah,
pops.
that's good to know. I'm never afraid, by the way. When I see I'll be like, yeah, like, we're going anyways. Don't worry about it. It seems to me, as someone who's been following your career now for a little bit, that you've had a bit of a, I don't want to say evolution, but your position in the media especially has been portrayed not just as a consultant, but really as an advocate for restaurants during tough economic times and during these really tough economic times, I should say. Can you tell us a little bit about the foundation of the Independent Hospitality Coalition and how that came about?
And that goes back to chapter one, where I almost started a riot in my junior high because I was sticking up for the little guy,
Hmm.
and then I got busted and almost expelled because I had some of these punk rock lyrics that talked about, political positions. But I've always been this person for, not necessarily a revolutionary, but, someone that didn't really accept no for an answer,
Yeah.
and always trying to find another way. And when I would hear about these codes and these policies, I would oftentimes, as one would do, question, why do we have these?
Hmm.
They really don't make sense. And as I had, progressed in the work that I had been doing or still do, I had realized that I don't want to keep on just accepting this. I
Hmm.
actually want to change some of these things because my customers, who are mostly disenfranchised, mostly small business owners, mostly independent restaurants, not Buffalo Wild Wings, they can't afford these requirements. They can't afford it to install a drinking fountain in their restaurant. And so I had been advocating on things before the pandemic that really weren't going anywhere because I was still very much just a young fast Eddie and didn't know how to organize. I didn't know how to work together with people. I was still kind of like very angry, and I didn't really lead with love, and I needed to go through some things in order for me to get to that place. And the pandemic did that to me.
Hmm.
It changed me. When the pandemic hit, it was, shortly after that I just saw how much of a struggle restaurants are going through. I wasn't able to see the sushi chef bring their fish anymore. I wasn't able to see the ladies bring their furniture out anymore. My girlfriend Lynn Ta, who owns a restaurant, All Day Baby in H-Lay, was devastated and would wake up in the morning, hysterically crying because she didn't know how she was going to run her business and what the future lied for her. I knew that I had to do something. I think anyone at that time who was on the fence about getting more involved and helping their community definitely jumped onto that other side. And that was for sure me. And it was all in. And I went to the first city hall meeting that there was, and I organized as many restaurant people as I could to talk about what we were going through. And it was a first step to what is now the Independent Hospitality Coalition, because everybody was in their own silos, kind of trying to do something and to interpret the regulations that were coming from the health department, to talk about who we were, to give a voice to our role in the fabric of economic society. And we eventually got together and we formed in April 2020 the Independent Hospitality Coalition.
Mm-hmm.
It was a local organization that stood for Los Angeles, that stood for independent restaurants, providing that community and that support and that advocacy. And it had to be something that was specific to Los Angeles. As great as the California Restaurant Association is and what they do on a state level, they are not as localized as we are. They are not familiar with the county of LA issues that we deal with here. LA County is the biggest county in the nation. We probably have some of the most restrictive regulations of anyone that was dealing with anything. And no one knew how to deal with those regulations. No one knew what 50% of your occupancy meant. Even the inspectors didn't know. And I was on the phone with my inspectors like, hey, did you get these new rules that came out? And they're like, no, not yet. And I'm like, well, they're supposed to hit a 5. I'm like, okay, well, I'll tell you when I get them. And it was like, you don't even know what the regulations are. You're the enforcing body, and it was like, somebody has to have some sort of resource for this. And I was tired of having to be something where people had to hire me in order for them to get this information. And so through the Independent Hospitality Coalition, we were able to provide those resources. We were able to provide that voice. We were able to work together into changing some of the policies that have set up barriers for small businesses for years, making the process easier and having that voice and getting in the room and talking about what other counties and cities and states are doing, bringing that information to the small business person, things that impact us. And so that's where I was born, and that's how I wanted to move forward with developing more the IHC.
At the time when you were standing this up, what were some of those policies that are like LA County specific that you were advocating for, that you felt like IHC was the necessary body to be out there?
Well, the first thing was to be on the defense of the regulations and to provide the interpretation of the policies. That was the first thing. Another thing was to be an outlet for operators who wanted to get involved, and where could they put their energy into things. So there was a very traumatizing bill. I can't remember the name of it at the time, but it was to provide rent relief for restaurant owners during the pandemic, right? You know how we had that for the residences?
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have them for the restaurants, but there was a bill through Senator Wiener's office that we were supporting and working with the Golden Gate Restaurant Association, the Bay Area people, like a lot of different restaurant groups, and being there, pushing this thing forward. And it was my first big lesson, that bill that died in appropriations. And it was maybe because we just weren't organized enough yet. But, that was kind of the first big thing that we did. Then I was like, okay, what are things that we can win? Okay, how about we have this requirement, or we used to have a requirement that in the county of LA only, that any business that served alcohol had to have separate sex restrooms. So even a place like Hayato in the Row, maybe it's like 600 square feet, 700 square feet or something, they would have to build 2 restrooms in there just because they served alcohol. There was a county health requirement. And so we changed that code, right? That was some low-hanging fruit. Maybe we can do that, right? There were some things that we did when it came to, parking, right? So anytime that you had to provide valet because your alcohol permit said you had to have it, or because you're expanding your restaurant, or you're trying to build a new restaurant if you're crazy enough at that time, we were able to put through the emergency planning ordinance, and that was to remove parking for any new restaurant or pedestrian-friendly business. So that was the thing. We work with the council office in finding low-cost, no-cost ways to help the small business community. And so we had a laundry list of different items that we put together that we knew would make it less expensive for a business. A lot of them had to do with kind of alcohol and alcohol on the public right of way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big one for us, right? The alfresco program and furthering it. We backed a state bill to allow alcohol sales to go by Senator Dodd, which is a big one for us because we needed to have those resources. We needed to have more opportunities to make money. Lynn also did a bodega during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
She wanted to you couldn't have dining, but hey, could you open up a market? Health department was saying, you can't do that. That's not fair. And we're like, why? Why can't we do that? We're trying to survive. We were trying to push for more leniency on how we could use our spaces and how we could have what we call satellite food service and to put more kitchens outside. So that was something. So it really is time specific on what restaurants need now. And that is the thing that we're advocating for. Absolutely. You probably want to get to SB 478. The junk fee bill. I mean, that's a huge deal for restaurants right now. So we have to get together. We have to organize because that's the thing that's most meaningful for restaurants right now. And that's what we want to be there for them when we advocate.
Oh, we're going to get to the junk fees. Don't you worry, Eddie. I can see it. We're both excited to get there. Well, I got to say, first of all, that's you mentioned a lot of accomplishments. I worked in politics for a while, and if any of the politicians I worked for would have been able to list that many policy wins over the course of a relatively short span, I would love to run them again for office, right? That's a really, really impressive resume of things. Let's talk about one of your most recent bills that's been advancing up in Sacramento, and that is Assembly Bill 2550. It was recently in the news, and we talked about it on the podcast, but can you give us a refresher of what the bill is and what it aims to achieve?
Yeah, AB 2550, it's a Small Business Support Act, and it was formerly known as the Bistro Act, which is a much cooler name in my opinion, but we had to be more political with the way that we worded it. And so that was in working with AB 1217, which was to renew the outdoor dining privileges within the state authority. I built a relationship with a very nice assembly member, Gabriel. He was the author of that bill. And in advocating, I was close with their staff and I told them, hey, we're going to need to start permanentizing our outdoor patios. I have an idea of things that we can do, which again, I feel are very low hanging fruit that are in our building code today, that are in our health codes today, that will help with fostering and supporting outdoor dining in a permanent fashion, right? And from a compliance perspective. So it's 13 building and health code updates that are going to save California restaurants millions of dollars in unnecessary construction, right? Things that are long overdue, low-hanging fruit, right? Like the drinking fountain thing.
Yeah.
Why do we need drinking fountains for restaurants? And when we are already required by the civil code, the California Civil Code, to provide water for our patrons.
It's like relics of the past, basically, and trying to figure out why do we still have them and can we eliminate them?
Right, exactly. And even for, Be Bright Coffee, one of the reasons the health department was going to slow down their opening is because there was a pipe, because that's an older building, it's a 2-story building, and there was a pipe that was running over his espresso machine.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh yeah, well, you need to put a whole new ceiling over your espresso machine now, because what if dust falls into the drink? Because it collects up there and you're not going to be able to clean it. And I was like, it's covered by the espresso machine. It comes out of a dispenser. So it's already protected. And, the reality is most other counties would see the logic in that, but not County of LA. And so, it's things like that again, that I think are long overdue. When you have dispensers, for example, again, let's say you go to an In-N-Out and, the beverage dispenser is in the customer area and you want to, get a beverage out, you have to have the smooth ceiling above the dispenser because it's what if the dust falls into your beverage as you pour into it. But the reality is these devices already have a cover over them. And I know I'm getting really technical right now, but these are the things that only impact you when they do.
Yeah.
Right? When you're opening that type of business. Another one is you can't have a grease trap, which is an above ground grease trap that is supposed to mitigate. It's like a grease filter before it goes to the sewer in your kitchen. But they were designed to be underneath the 3-compartment sink, which is in the kitchen. So these things that are just not practical. If you can't see the grease trap because it's in a different room, the thing is going to blow up. That's just really what happens. Like if you can't see where the dirt, like you have to have it in the same room or the employees are not going to see it. And so a lot of these things health officials are actually on board with and wanted to actually add things to,
Yeah.
not the county of LA.
Yeah.
So let's be clear here. Other county health officials have wanted to add to this bill because they think a lot of things are overdue and we need to update so that the policy keeps up with the progress of the industry.
But if this passes at the state level, then the county will have no choice but to comply, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And it kind of strikes me as the same thing that happens when like you get a bunch of old septuagenarian men legislating over things like birth control, right? That they have absolutely no experience with. It sounds like something similar is happening where folks who have actually never practically been in the restaurant industry are legislating over it as well, and how you get some of these things, perhaps, at least historically speaking. You mentioned junk fees, and I want to talk a little bit about that too. It's obviously coming really soon. One thing that has sort of struck me is that it's still really unclear what is going to be happening and whether restaurants are going to have to comply. Do you know anything about what restaurants can expect when that deadline hits? I think it's June 1st, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to comply, period, right? So it's no service charges, including if you have a table of six or more and you want to have an automatic, tip on that one, on that type of party, you can't have that. It's not allowed. It has to be a voluntary tip,
Hmm.
which is just not fair. These are things that we've been doing for years. Right. Obviously, you've been reading the articles, it sounds like, that have been coming out talking. And Heather Sperling did a really great job of outlining, what goes into a restaurant and what actually the margins are and why they get that way, which I commend her on doing such a great job and putting so much time into that. It was really well written. But really, they're going to have to comply. Are they going to move forward? I think a lot of restaurants right now, they're seeing the bank account just going down and further, and they're at a place like, I think I might need to make a different life decision right now and do something different. And I think that that's kind of what a lot of businesses are going to do. I think they're just going to choose to, like, it's just too hard. I mean, labor is going up, everything is going up. You can't even get insurance in a lot of places these days. It's very unachievable. It's really just no access. Even our housing units, even our nonprofits. I'm also board president of ArtShare LA here in the Arts District, where we have 30 affordable housing units to sustain and support emerging artists. Helping with issues like displacement. And we couldn't get insurance. It was so expensive. And there's no support for housing. And unfortunately, all the money that's being spent is not given to there's housing units right now that need help.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not getting it. I'll digress and go back to what you're going to see. And I mean, in my opinion, you're going to see just a lot of restaurant closures because people are already at the tipping point, and they just don't see that officials are seeing them. You're right, that they're not involving them in the discussions, and that is really the big problem. Is that there's this battle of large corporations against like small businesses, and obviously it's the people with the most money that always win.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They will always dominate. They have people, as I've been going to the Capitol, I've been seeing how laws are being made. I've been seeing that the people with the most lobbyists, who they literally have offices up there of people that just stay up there, and then every day they just lobby their issues because they get paid to do that. A small business community cannot keep up with that.
Yeah.
Right? We cannot win against the unions and the labor people that go up there. They're in just such full force. And really, one of my goals with the IGC is to get businesses to be at the table and to get up to the Capitol, which we've been doing with AB 2550, to expose them to how laws are being made, to get them in the room and to do the things so that we can help make change. But really, I think that we're just going to see more closures.
Terrible.
Quite frankly.
That's that's kind of what we saw with this point about lobbying. It strikes me that DoorDash and all the delivery apps, they got a carve out in the junk fee ban bill, probably because they had the lobbying muscle behind it. When you're talking about all these things, junk fees, and even the provisions in your bill, right? AB 2550, they all sound like things that make sense. Like, why wouldn't a legislator be in favor of things like that? Who is against these kinds of things? Like, meaning who is against AB 2550 and who is against giving restaurants some sort of a carve out for junk fees?
Well, AB 2550 is so far untouchable. It has been great. As I've been learning how the legislation works and how legislators want to get behind things, I know they have a big fear on opposition. It is the first thing that Assembly member had asked me, Assembly member Gabriel had asked me, who would be our potential opposition? And let's go talk to them so that we don't take them with us on our journey. And I knew it was going to be the health department. And these are my homies. These are people that I talk to on a state level, not local. Local, that's a different dynamic. But like on a state level, these are people that want progress and that want to contribute to climate change, to reducing climate change. And so we have gotten nothing but support. And so both committees that we've gone through so far have given us unanimous support. And it's been really wonderful to see every legislator that I talk to is for it. The problem that we're having is right now, today, coincidentally, we're going through the Appropriations Committee. And this is where most bills go and die. But I have a lot of hope that mine will not. And we will continue. And once it gets out of this, then we'll go to the assembly floor, and then we'll go to the Senate. We'll repeat the process all over again. But as it is right now, I think most legislators, they want to help. They just don't know how.
Yeah.
And so that is what I'm trying to do with this bill, as it's going to be the starting point of many other things to come of what we're going to be able to do for the Los Angeles community.
And what about on the other topic? Because one of the things that struck me about the piece that you mentioned, the one you just mentioned, but also the one that Stephanie Brajo wrote, is that like one thing that restaurateurs said in the article was like, I just wish the government would stop putting their foot on our neck. It seems like they feel very much so like every day another shoe drops, and it's like another thing that they need to do, whether it's rising minimum wage. Okay, we agree. Great that workers are going to be getting paid more, but that is going to affect the margins. Junk fees, boom, another thing. And just the margins just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I think there's such a desire when it comes from legislators to, especially Democratic legislators in the state of a place like California, to help the disenfranchised and to help the little guy. Yet it seems like restaurants kind of get lost in all that. They're not quite viewed as the little guy, but they're not the big guy, right? They're not like the chains and the franchises, the Buffalo Wild Wings, to use your favorite example. I feel like legislators don't always rise to that occasion. Am I crazy?
Well, they're controlled by the lobby, right? It comes down to labor groups, unions are all powerful, right? They have a lot of time there, and so they're inclined. They need us to be involved. They need us to be up there at the state capitol, right? We can't have CRA be the only game in town.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have local representation. We need to talk about the things that impact us here in Los Angeles. Or we're never going to make a change. And another thing about these more powerful groups is we have to know how to work with them. We can't be afraid to have the difficult conversations. I can't be afraid to talk about issues like gentrification and displacement, and things like the living wage and what we expect. How can we find compromise? It has to be done with win-win. And we got to be able to get in the room with the unions. We got to be able to get in the room with the labor people, because they are powerful. And I feel like if we're going to get anything done, it's going to be together, and it's not going to be in silos.
I think that's really well said. So what's next on the horizon in terms of your advocacy, the bills we've talked about?
Well, I have a lot of agendas on what I want to do with my skills that I have learned in cutting red tape. Ultimately, I do have a goal of helping with our housing. I feel like I've been such a great leader in cutting red tape. I know where the bottlenecks are. I know how the city works. I know how DWP works, or actually doesn't work. And I feel like there are ways that we can have this be fixed if we get the right people in the right room. I want to help Los Angeles. I want to help California. I want to do a better job. I want to be a better role model. Growing up, I'm a product of the LA Unified School District, at least up until about 10th grade. And, I want to give back. The role models that we had back in those days are just not great or they're not conducive to where we want to go. And I feel like we put a lot of money and a lot of time into to fixing the faucet, but we're not fixing the water valves themselves, right? We're not fixing the education. We're not providing those role models for kids. And I feel like, we all have to try to do that work. And if there's ever a time to do that, it's now. And so on top of just, advocating for a particular industry, it's more than that, Luca. It's about also being an inspiration and a leader, which the world is short of right now, which is going to inspire more leaders and more people to stand up and to walk into the fire and be ready for anything and to stick up for their community and working together with people so that we get things done. I think really that's where I see my future. When we talk about success, it's about living your values, and that's what I'm doing right now.
That's awesome. Now, if a consumer is listening to this or a restaurateur is listening to this and they're like, I like what this guy's saying, I want to get more involved, what would you say to them? How can they do that?
2 steps for you. The first step is you go to ihcla.org and you sign up to be a free member. That's the thing about CRA and versus us is that it's free. You have access to all the information and to me through our membership. Free, totally free. The second thing that you can do is you can donate. Go to the button, you press donate. If you can give me 10, 20, whatever you can give me, 100% of the money that funds IHC is from operators, all operators. And, I go to Capital, I have to, pay lawyers. I have a part-time employee. I have to, have a website. And there's so many bills for a nonprofit that I have to pay every day just to keep the lights on in order for me to compete with these other organizations that have predominantly run things for a very long time. If you like what you hear today, if you like what you hear me trying to go and support, I think you need to just contribute to us so that we can build this thing and stick up for Los Angeles and do a better thing for our restaurants.
I love it. We'll put it all in the show notes and we'll direct people there. Okay, Eddie, you've been so generous with your time, and I know we've kept you over, so I apologize for that. But we always finish with one question with all of our guests. When you look back at your career thus far, what are you most proud of?
The Independent Hospitality Coalition is probably my most proud, I think, accomplishment because we have done what I've always wanted to have here in Los Angeles, and that is have a resource and a voice for the restaurant community here in LA. And I think that's probably one of our biggest accomplishments over anything, because this is my true calling. This is what I've always wanted to do. This is who I've always wanted to be. And so I know that this is going to be putting me into the place that's going to project me into my future for many years to come. So, I'm dedicated to serve. I know this is what I want to do, and this is the starting point.
That's awesome. And where can people go if they want to donate to your mayoral campaign, by the way?
You have to wait. I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that.
That's just wishful thinking on my part. We need more folks like you in public office, my friend. Now, you've already told us where people can go donate, but where can people find you if they're looking for you?
You can just go to effiedesign.com, effiedesign&consulting.com. You can go to our website and you can see all the stories. You can see our testimonials. You can read a little bit about me. And then you can also get in touch with us and ask us, whatever you need. I do free 30-minute consultations. And then if you need me to go out there, then I charge to do like an on-site consultation if you need me. But I want to make sure I always have access, and people can always reach out to me if they have a question.
Sounds good. We'll put it all in the show notes. Well, Eddie, thanks again for your time. It's been a delight speaking with you.
Thank you, Luke. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the LA Food Podcast. Thanks to our guest, Eddie Navarrette, for taking the time to speak with us today. I learned so much, dear listener. I hope you did too. And if not, I hope you at least found it interesting. If you like what you heard today, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts, leave us a rating, review, subscribe. Seriously, all that stuff really helps us make our way up the charts on Spotify and Apple. We'll be back next week with another epic episode. But if you're looking for me in the meantime, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at the LA Countdown. That's TheLaCountDown. And you can find me on Instagram at LA Food Pod. That's LAFOODPOD.